Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today on our panel about fanfic, writers, and community. My name is Ella. I'll be hosting today's panel. I'm a fanfic writer and reader who's been in fandom for over 15 years and written in over a dozen fandoms. And I'm thrilled today to introduce our lovely panelists. So our guest of honor, of course, is Naomi Novik, an award-winning author and also a founding member of the Organization of Transformative Works, as well as one of the founders of the Archive of Her Own, a site which many of us hold dear and which likely will play a central part in today's discussion. Marina Berlin is a media critic and the published author of science fiction and fantasy stories, some of which have been translated and published in Hebrew. Say hi, Marina. She's been writing fanfic since 2007. Rotem Baruchin is a Geffen Award-winning author, a screenwriter, and a playwright. She ran one of the first Israeli fanfiction sites all the way back in 1998. And her debut novel, The City's Guardians, is due to be published in 2021. Dana Katz-Buchstav, say hi, Dana, has written fanfic for over 20 years. They've published short stories in the magazine Chalomot B'Aspamia and were nominated for the Geffen Award for their story Yam Yabasha. And Dana A. Has been reading and writing fanfic since the late 90s, as well as moderating fic exchanges. So thank you to all of you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to note that due to time constraints, unfortunately, we probably won't have time for questions from the audience. In the unlikely event that we do, please save them for the very end and write them in the chat. We'll try to fit them in as possible. So without further ado, I'd like to start with our first question. This is a question directed at Naomi, at Marina, and Dana A. A huge part of fandom is part of being part of a community. If you could tell us about an aspect of community life in fandom which has informed your writing. Marina, do you want to hit us off?
I think Naomi was starting to say something.
No, I'm sorry. I was just like, just one. No. Yeah.
Naomi, if you have yes. something, go ahead.
No. It's more like an exclamation.
Everyone's fighting. I'm just going to start. Okay.
Yes. Perfect.
That so obviously writing into writing in a fandom means that you have inbuilt readership, which I'm setting that aside. I'm just gonna say I'm not an author of any published fiction. I've only ever written fic. I used to write when I had ideas. As time went by, I don't know, something about that just kind of went away. But the thing that has kept me writing for years and years and years past when I might have stopped is various community events, communal writing events in fandom, which can be fic exchanges, gift exchanges, secret Santas, ficathons, promptathons, I don't know, charity ficathons. So fandom has just a lot of communal writing events that it's really fun to write around and to participate in. I don't necessarily have the motivation to sit down and start writing a fic based on an idea of my own, but when it's a kind of event where everyone is signing up for at the same time and nominating fandoms, and then there's a lot of excitement, what kind of fics we're going to get from this, and then people are encouraging each other about writing, and then people are comforting each other at the fact that the deadline is yesterday and we're still only and, I don't know how I would have continued writing if it wasn't for that community aspect of the whole thing.
Yeah. I think for me, it's, if I had to choose one thing, it's the fact that you the positive feedback, or generally feedback, but especially positive feedback, just the knowledge. I think I went from writing fanfic for many, many years to writing professional things or profic or whatever, original stories. And the amount of rejection that you have to face is very real, especially in the English market. You send a story out and you get, 50 rejections, whatever, even after those rejections, it goes through an editor, it can be published, and you will never hear back. And you will never hear back from readers if it's a short story in an anthology. And it's, you know, it's just devastating. I don't think I would be writing if I didn't have that background of fanfic, of knowing that things that I write are things that people want to read. And, you know, and just getting that validation of like, you know, we want your voice, we enjoy your stories. And if I just went my first original story, I sent it out and I think it went past the first round, and then the final round, they rejected it. And I didn't write again for like original stories for like 3 or 4 years, because I was just like, I don't want that rejection again. I don't need that experience. I mean, I've spent 2 years writing my book, which is almost ready for querying. And there's a very good chance that no one will ever read this book. There's a very good chance that no agent will want it, no publisher will want it. And I will have spent 2 years writing into a black hole, and no one will ever read this story or enjoy it. And I don't think that I would be able to do that if I didn't have the foundation of fanfic and of the community, and knowing that there are people who love my writing, and that it's not about me, and that I can write things of value and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely think that, fandom, because fandom, right, is a place of pleasure, right? Nobody gets, it's very hard to get paid to be in fandom. And so because of that, it frees you to pursue your own pleasure and find your own voice in ways that we aren't encouraged, that routinely women in particular are routinely encouraged not to do, are often in fact actively discouraged from pursuing, are often made to feel, women often aren't able to advocate for themselves and for something that, just I want. We're taught routinely to think of, well, what does somebody else want? And in a way, the infrastructure of the community, that's one of the things that it gives us. I think it's that strength of being able to, of sort of, in a way, helping each other pursue our own delight. And I think that, I would say that that's influenced my work, not just in a necessarily in a practical way, which you both have described beautifully. I remember when we first started Yuletide, the Yuletide gift exchange, and it was one of those things where I think that was in 2000. I think it was like 2000 or something like that, or 1999 even. I don't know. It was quite a long time ago. And, it was one of those things where I don't know that I remember there being an exchange beforehand, because it was in the context of the US. And in the US, there's this tradition around Christmas time called Secret Santas, which was actually a kind of office tradition, because otherwise in the US, you sort of felt like you had to buy a gift for every person in your office. And that was an enormous burden that, made offices unproductive. And this is obviously, main preoccupation of the United States of American life, right? How to be more efficient in the workplace. And so instead what you would do is, there was this tradition that you would draw a name from a hat and you'd buy one gift for one person in your office and get one gift. And that was obviously, that was obviously super more convenient when you're in this insane idea of like giving gifts constantly to everybody and so we sort of jumped off that tradition when creating Yuletide. And the thing that made it feasible was code, was coming up with the process of being able to, that's what allowed Yuletide to become large. Because before, I think if there were exchanges, it was always hand assigned, right? You had to do it by hand. Yeah. And I wrote the code to actually mass assign people. And so, the first year, I think we had something like 200 people sign up. The next year it was 400. Then all of a sudden it sort of exploded. And because of that, because Yuletide had this built-in group, frankly, allowed us to move to the AO3. It provided the core of the AO3 because, you know, I essentially, I felt the Yuletide Code was sort of fragile and falling apart. And part of the ways that I, in a way, sort of built the time for myself to build the code for the AO3 was, okay, instead of like every year spending like a month kludging together this system so it still functions, I'm going to build a modern version and build it into the archive, and then it becomes available to everyone. And that impulse, that sort of that process, right, of taking, of essentially when you found something useful, when you found a good tool, when you found something in fandom that works, one of the wonderful things, the freedom of fandom, is that you can then, you want to share it, right? Whether even if it's just infrastructure is shared, you know, it's because the commerciality in a way is not there. There isn't, you know, if you think about it, if a corporation, you know, if a corporation wrote like gift exchange code, right, a tool for gift exchange, they would make it proprietary. They would try to charge you to use it. They would not just share it and put it up. And, you know, because I wrote that code, like I think 2-3 years ago, we had a new coding volunteer who showed up, Tiki Instant, who came in and literally rewrote the code and made it, I think, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude faster. And all of a sudden it was like, you know, before it would take, I think, about 2 days of processing for everybody to be assigned. And all of a sudden it was completing in like 15 minutes. And it was like, wait, did it work? And it had worked. And that's a thing where, you know, I myself, I had written the original code, but I had no time anymore, because all of us, our lives move onward. And that's a constant thing that happens in fandom that, you know, was one of the motivating factors. I'm sorry, I'm totally digressing here, but one of the motivating factors for the AO3. Okay, good. Because I'm sorry, I'm just like, blah, 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 blah.
It just sounds like the new
code. Oh, but this is great.
Okay.
All of us have a very dear place of Yuletide in our hearts, so this is fascinating to hear.
Yes, well, and sorry, but just more broadly, that somebody comes along and builds something, and if you put up walls around it and say, this is mine and you can't have it, you are simultaneously keeping people out and keeping yourself in, right? The fact of letting go of things, letting go of a piece of code that you wrote 20 years ago, a website that you started, letting other people take over and moving on to a new thing frees other people to have what I often think of as a kind of founder's energy. You know, this is something that you see in fact in businesses and nonprofits in general, where the original founders are like super excited, have tons of energy, pour that energy in, and then it kind of sputters out. And then, you know, it turns into kind of like a struggle over it, because they try to keep hold of something, even though emotionally they've actually on some level moved on. And what fandom does is it allows you to when you've built something that people care about, and you let somebody else take it, and you sort of say, all right, you run with it. You know, it's like you pass the ball and you can move on. And you can do that because of the sense in which you're within the community and you value the community and you want the community as a whole to grow and prosper. And that there's a sense of the community as a kind of living thing that is greater than the sum of the individuals having shipping wars and, you know, things like that, right, on the inside. So
it goes back to the whole thing about fandom being a gift economy, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
If we have time, somebody who knows sociology explain what a gift economy is. I'm not qualified.
I feel extremely called out since I have a bachelor's and a master's in sociology, like for sure.
Yes, that was my intention. Go you.
A gift economy. I mean, Naomi's been talking about this stuff like since the con began, but if anyone like is unfamiliar with the term, a gift economy means that in fandom, people essentially exchange, instead of exchanging goods for money, they exchange fic for feedback or fic for other fic, or just they give each other gifts. And that's how the economy of fandom happens, very broadly.
And it's just very symbolic that AO3 arose from a literal gift exchange. So.
Yes, for those who, I think this is a detail that a lot of people watching this may not know, that AO3 grew kind of out of Yuletide in a way.
Yeah,
I did not know this until now.
Right. Well, you know, the thing about Yuletide, right, is it actually grew out of I built the automated archive software for Sentinel fandom back in like 1996. And then after that, I didn't have a degree in computer science yet. I was just teaching myself Perl. And then after that, you know, I sort of moved, the many people that I'd come into contact with on that project, those were the people with whom, you know, I did VividCon, which was a convention for vidding that we had in Chicago for many years. And those were, you know, in a way, one of the key things, actually, as, just more broadly as an artist, right? As an artist, because we're working kind of independently, we're not in the framework of like a corporation, a structure that kind of keeps you in. One of the key things as an artist is you need to find your crew, your team, the people that will do, if you want to make a bigger project, right? If you want to just write your own stories, you can do that. But if you want to build infrastructure in fandom, if you want to organize something in fandom, you need multiple people with you. And you can't build a big project until you've done the smaller projects. And that's a sort of thing that, you know, it wasn't conscious. I wasn't like, well, in 5 years from now, I'm going to want to start in that fan fiction archive. And so let me start working on that. It's just, you know, it was the thing that you were doing because you serve your community. And when people see you serving your community, it calls out their service, you know, because nobody wants to feel like they're wasting their time, right? I do think that that's one of the big things that inhibits people for pursuing things that they want to do, is the sense of, well, I don't know if this will work. And if it does work, I don't know if anybody's going to care. And I don't want to waste my time. And that, to answer that, you need people around you who are willing to put in work themselves and who have proven their judgment to you. Like, I have friends who will say, I don't think this is a good idea. And if they say that to me, I'm like, all right, forget that idea, right? And you need that around you to build any larger project.
Writing fanfic. I'm sorry. Should we continue in with the questions?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm just thinking that writing fanfic can often, and also writing stories in general, can be like starting a conversation. So it's like you build this prompt into the world. You say, hey, what if I wrote an alternate universe where one of them worked in a yarn shop? Completely random example. And then you see if anybody's like call and response, if anybody's responding, if anybody's like, yes, you should do this, or, ooh, I will write you 500 words of how it will go, or I will draw you fan art and I will kiss this person's feet because they are awesome. So yeah, doing it all in and community organizers are worth their weight in gold. So.
It reminded me, what Naomi said reminded me of something that I learned in film school. And I know Rotem also went to film school, and Rotem does a lot of community projects as well. And I remember in film school, one of the things I always heard was like literally in first year of film school, it was like, find your crew, like find people that you can do stuff with and who you can grow with. And that's your strategy. Yeah. And Rotem, do you want to talk about how that impacted, like, I don't know, you write plays and, you know, just do all of this Spanish stuff. I mean, you literally wrote like, what was it? Like you wrote a musical about the life of Angelus from Buffy that went up at a con. Like
the death and life of Leon.
Yeah.
You wrote a combo of Shakespeare and what was it? 12th Night something Buffy? Like
it was Midsummer Night's Dream, together with Rocky Horror Picture Show and the Buffy musical. And the plot was like that, that Titania is like a fangirl, and she always go to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and Oberon is like super angry, and he like bewitches everyone, and they come to the forest, but there's also like a bunch of professional actors coming to the forest, and it's like a whole mess, and everybody's falling in love, and Oberon turns one of those actors into a Trekkie instead of a donkey. So I think those works, it's so much fun, because when I write stories, even a bit when I write fan fiction, because it's less of a community in Hebrew, and I think I'm the only one here that writes only in Hebrew. So it's mostly alone. We do have a wonderful community that like responds and reacts, and but it's never like writing a play or writing anything that's like a stage project. People always, you get like the responses immediately. You work with a bunch of people. It's so much fun.
I think maybe in fandom, there is some pressure. On one hand, it's true what you said about finding your crew. On the other hand, if you try to go and recruit people to be on your crew, I don't know, maybe it's just imposter syndrome, but I think that would be very, who am I to recruit people? Who am I to draw this attention? Do you guys feel that? Do you folks feel that?
In what? In like original projects or in?
Is it different between original projects and fan fiction?
I mean, obviously in original projects, in pro projects, there's obviously always the looming question of money, because everybody needs to get paid if they're doing it for their job. I guess, you know, the thing is, imposter syndrome is a very real thing. I myself have been fortunate enough I don't have it. I basically just have always assumed that if I think it's a good idea, I assume it's a good idea unless somebody tells me otherwise. And but the thing is, you know, I will say that very often, you know, you look at, I mean, if I talk about I've talked about Yuletide, I've talked Big VidCon, AO3, these are the projects that worked. I've started at least a dozen different things besides that didn't work, that nobody picked up, nobody ran with, didn't catch other people's imagination. And that, you know, just didn't, and in fact, increasingly, my problem now is a question of, I don't have time myself to pursue, and you can't get other people to join up unless you're joining up, unless you're doing it. And I do think that's, you just, in a way, that would be my sort of feeling, that with infrastructure, part of it is you have to be willing to put in kind of the sweat equity yourself, enough of it to give people confidence. Because, right, that's the flip side of, you know, you need the confidence to start something yourself. You also need confidence to join a project. And that confidence has to be, I don't want to waste my time. Like if you are saying, hey, I'm going to start this, and then you're going to walk away. If this feels like an ephemeral project to me, then I don't want to join. does this feel like it's going to be fun for me? Is this thing that you want to build something that I want to build, that I want? I mean, that is actually how the AO3 got built. It's that it was something that a lot of us wanted. By the time I wrote that post, I was not, I'd had multiple conversations with people about how we really kind of needed a front end. And then I just had this sort of torrent of rage after FanLib showed up and strike through had happened, and sort of, like went on and yelled about it. And, but frankly, look, if you actually look at the post about the AO3, it's basically me sort of saying, I want somebody else to do it. I don't have time, somebody else do it. And then literally everybody like piling into the comments saying, I want this too. I would help. But, and there was a point where I was sort of like, all right, well, either I just drop it and let this energy just fall, or you step up, and you do your best. And then that's it was an enormous amount of work. So I don't want to downplay it. And a lot of times people can't afford to do that work. I probably took a chunk out of my own career to do that work. And obviously it was coming from the place of privilege that I could put food on my table. I had a partner who was both able to support me and emotionally supportive. And those are resources. And, so part of the answer, right? Part of the answer to the question of imposter syndrome is, you do have to have, you have to sort of conquer some internal imposter syndrome. But the other piece is also imposter syndrome is not just like some weird thing that people have. It's a thing that people have if they have reasonable expectations based on societal situations and their resources, that it would be very hard for them to accomplish something because there are external obstacles. And so, you want to balance not letting imposter syndrome stop you with not beating your head against a brick wall and then blaming yourself that you weren't able to crush the brick wall with your skull, and then the answer to it is often start smaller, right? And frankly, I couldn't have built the AO3 if that was the first project that I'd started. I had to build the little projects, to learn, to get there. And that's good, so it's sort of, that's what I would say about imposter syndrome is, to sort of try and fight it internally, but also, take aim at it strategically, take aim at the real obstacles. Don't magnify them, but they are there, and don't in a way, imposter syndrome, it's funny, sometimes tends to get turned around as a weapon, to you're just giving in to your imposter syndrome, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh great, now I've got imposter syndrome about having imposters, right? So that's.
I'd like to just about something you started with when you said you started with a lot of projects that didn't work out until you made the ones that did. Just to say that sometimes the smaller projects, and especially if I'm specifically talking about fandom or fandom communities, fandom is a community which has a million different communities inside, and then each of those communities has other smaller and smaller, more niche communities inside. And sometimes if you have, let's say you're arranging some kind of, I don't know, an event, a gift exchange, some kind of project just for people in your little fandom in your small corner of the internet, and only 5 people sign up, but you get 5 stories for for your initial project, I mean, that's a success. That's something it's just really fun to have. It doesn't all have to be, you know, like large scale. Like sometimes if you write a fic and you only get whatever, 1 comment or 2 comments or 3 comments, as opposed to a few dozen comments, you know, the scale doesn't necessarily matter.
No, and in fact, I would say one of the wonderful things about fandom is the way in which, you know, scale really doesn't have to matter. And in fact, it's one of those things where, you know, I've written stories that have like a tiny handful of kudos. And the thing is that it doesn't matter because that was the fandom that I was in and the fandom was tiny. You know, I've written stories for fandoms that are like cartoons that I watched when I was 10 years old. And most people today, you can't actually find those cartoons, and, you know, and you can't actually experience them as an adult because I'm writing my 10-year-old, I'm in response to my 10-year-old experience, as opposed to for what any adult person watching the show today would get out of it. And that's not, you know, so that's almost literally a fandom of one, you know, and in a way you don't have to care in fandom because there's no gatekeeping. You know, nobody's going to stop you posting your story to the AO3 for like the fandom that nobody else is in, just because, you know, there's like, oh, there's not enough fans for that fandom. You know, the tag doesn't exist yet. I posted stories where literally the pairing tag didn't exist, and it doesn't come up in the autocomplete, and you're like, oh wow, nobody's going to read this, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because so what? And what's wonderful also is some of those stories, you post them, and I have the experience now where somebody comments or leaves kudos on a story that I posted 15 years ago, and is like, wow, I'm writing on this in 2021, and they were looking for it then. And so that's what the value of an archive is, that you don't know what's going to matter to somebody in the future, and you're leaving a gift for somebody in the future who wants that story as much as you wanted that story.
Gives me a question about.
So Naomi, I think that's an amazing point to make, and I think that really also leads into our next question, which is about the different types of creative freedom between original writing and fanish writing. Like what you said, that, you know, you're writing for yourself and you're not even necessarily writing for an audience. So I would love to hear from you guys, if you could talk about the different freedoms that each type of writing offers.
Assign an answer.
No, I'm totally. I totally want somebody. I'm ready to jump in.
Rotem.
Yeah, but you guys start.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, you said my name, right?
Yeah, Rotem. Do you want to pitch in?
Yes. Okay, so the type of freedom that each writing allows me. So I think my original fiction is always like, there's always a stage of like the empty page of anxiety. And this kind of freedom actually scares me. So limitations are always better. When I write fan fiction, it's like there's a whole bunch of limitations and restrictions. Of course, I put them on myself. I can write an AU, but I don't like writing an AU. I write the characters just like I know them from like the canon, from the fanon. So it's kind of like the limitations are my freedom. There's like much less of an empty page and anxiety. So I think it's like, you know, there's an empty page, but there's also like, oh, there's what you're drawing. And this is like the color palette. And here are your brushes, and just go ahead and draw this. And it's so much more fun. It's so much more easier. I love writing fanfics. So I think part of the reason that I write a series of stories in the same world is because I kind of write my own fanfics. I return to the same characters, and it kind of make it, I kind of know the brushes, I kind of know the color palette now. So it's much more fun and it's much more easy, and there's less of an empty page and anxiety.
I would say, for me at least, the pleasure of fan fiction for me is almost always, I sort of mentioned this before, it's the let me in. It's a impulse. It's, I read a story. When I watch a show or I read a story or I see a movie and it's just great. And I just am like, wow, that was just great. And I start to finish and I just walk away happy. I don't write fanfic for it often. The thing that calls fan fiction from me is when something doesn't happen that I'm like, I want that to happen. And obviously very often that's a relationship, right? And that is, either or certain kinds of character things that I feel like this could have been in there, and that's not where my interests, the things that I am interested in, the things that I want to look at and think about are very clearly not what the original creator wanted to look at and think about. And that disconnect is the place that creates a place of and now I can play. And I would say, to be honest, I don't know, for me, the differences, the creative difference between my fan fiction and my original fiction are at this point in time almost entirely sort of kind of boring practical ones, which is just, I don't have the time to spend a year of my life writing 150,000 words without, in a way, that's supported by my publisher and all the people involved in that. And so, in fact, one of the things when I'm deciding on a commercial project, I almost always write about 15,000 words of whatever next book I'm going to do, and I give it to my editor at Random House, and she says, and in fact, it was one of those funny things where the first time this happened, it freaked them all out. I wrote like a chunk of a story and I sent it to them, and they made me an offer. And, in the industry, you sort of like, this is a big offer and this is a sort of lowball offer. And it was sort of a lowball offer. And I was like, that you're not excited about it. I literally could tell that they were not excited about it. And when I said, never mind, they were all like, wait, you're going someplace else. And I'm like, no, I'm just going to write something else, because I literally, I didn't want to put 2 years of my work, of labor, the labor of the copy editing and the draft, all the labor that goes into producing an actual published book that ends up on the shelf and gets marketed. I didn't want to do that work for a project that my publisher, who are my crew, they're like the actors, right? If you're writing a play and you give it to the actors, and the actors are all like, you don't want that. You want everybody to be like, yay, I'm so excited for my part. And they sort of, and in fact, what's interesting is, in a way, that creative freedom, right? The confidence to say, I don't need to do this project. We'll do a different project together. That is something that, going back to the previous question, that fandom gave me, the sense that this isn't my only shot, right? Just because you've made me this offer, I don't have to take it. I can actually choose to do something else. And I have the confidence that, you didn't like this. Okay, I'm going to give you something else. And that is something that fandom absolutely has given me. I can't describe the number of times where, like, I've posted a story and somebody's like, this was not for me, I didn't like this one, and that's either it's not their fandom, it's not their pairing. There was people are like, I didn't like this characterization. I'm like, all right, just hang on 5 minutes. Here's the next one. That sense of not being boxed in by canon. The sense that canon, one of the things actually about canon that you increasingly realize, right? And that I think doing professional writing helps with, is that, like this book, guess what? There's nothing true in this book. I made up every word. It's not true. And if you write a fanfic story about it, your story is literally as true as my story. Just because, and it's like, if I write a piece of Sherlock Holmes fanfic, my story is as true as Arthur Conan Doyle's story, right? It's not less true, just, and canon is really just, this is the stuff that we all share, but you don't need to share that much, right? That you can do a fairy tale retelling that's so far afield, and people enjoy enjoy like the touch of the connection to the fairy tale. You can do that with fandom too. And so, yeah, I would, that's my long rambling answer that I will stop now. So.
I had a whole list of freedoms of fic that I wanted to talk about. And like the first one that comes to mind, it's actually something that I got from a particular story in the Person of Interest fandom, which is basically, it's the climactic scene of a novel, but the novel isn't there. It's like an alternate universe where the main character actually turned evil and his love interest is showing that he's still loyal and faithful to this guy despite him being evil. And it's a scene. It's a single scene. You don't get the entire 50K that led up to this place. You don't need it. You know how it happened. And I was just like, that's amazing. I can do this. Because a lot of the time, this goes back to what Naomi said about needing smaller projects to build up from. You may not be able to write this 50K, but you may be able to write this scene. And that's a freedom of fanfic that you don't have with published literature. You can be like, okay, in this world, they're actually werewolves, and the gender system is doing this and this and this. And also, they're all Orthodox Jewish, because I said so. And you can just do that and write your scene and not write the entire framework. On the other hand,
I would read that. I would read that.
Don't challenge me.
Yes, challenge me.
Yes,
go do it. Go do it. Now you're
challenged.
You said it on video.
I will take this under consideration. Yeah. Right. And on the other hand, a thing that I've been thinking about the last couple of days about the freedom of writing professional fic, it's not exactly a freedom, it's you limit less the people you're reaching out to in a way. Because I've had people follow me around from fandom to fandom and they're like, oh, I read your stuff. That's because my stuff is barely fandom anymore. It's so AU, nobody knows. To make a slight tangent, there's a thing about how gelatin is kosher, even though it's derived from pigs, because it's been through so many chemical processing anymore. It knows no more form of pig. That's what my stories do to canon, basically. And I'm happy with this. But even so, you have people who are like, well, I have an emotional attachment to these characters because of canon. And I will not read something that's not in my fandom because no emotional attachment. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I want more people to read the story. Therefore, I will put in the work and try to make them emotionally attached to my characters. I think this involves staples or something like that. So those, and also in fandom, you have more freedom of form. You can write multimedia in a way that's really hard to do in more published things. You can be like, okay, and the next chapter is a ballad because I said so. You can be like, you can supplement your story with cosplays. You can supplement it with plushies that you made yourself out of yarn. You can supplement it with a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Cookies.
So
Girl Scout
I
cookies.
think you raise a really definitely Girl Scout cookies. Then I think you raise a really interesting point, is in that many writers of original or professional writers writing original stories actually continue to write fanfic in addition to the original stories. So, like, obviously, this is the case with you, and then why would you feel that? And Marina, this is also the case with you. Naomi, please feel free to pitch in.
I want to know why Naomi, like, I want to know Naomi's answer. I'm dying to hear Naomi's answer.
I mean, the thing is, right, I wrote fan fiction for 10 years when nobody was paying me to write a word. I mean, it's just, that's kind of like a thing I do. I don't know. It's sort of, I don't know. I mean, to me, it feels like, let's say that somebody, I like to use this metaphor. Let's say that somebody was playing an instrument from the time when they were a small child, from the time when they were a teenager, they played piano and they liked playing piano. And, and then you're like, well, why are you playing piano? I was like, well, I've been doing it all the time. I never stop. It's fun. I'm like, I became a writer, in a way, because I had so much fun doing it that I just wanted to do it more. And that's, I would say, right, that one of the things that has happened for me with canon, and in fact, which makes my fanfic stories less satisfying for some people over time, is that I do now increasingly treat canon as, just something that it's inspiration. I have gotten increasingly, obviously the term author, right? It comes from authority. It carries that word, that weight in English, that sense of power, of domination, of, somebody setting lines that are enforced by some kind of power. And in fact, it is literally enforced by copyright in our world. And for a long time, that was one of the big things that we worked on with the AO3, was sort of trying to explode this myth that, you couldn't write and post, that there was in fact almost something wrong about having your own story ideas set in somebody else's universe. Like, the only reason, so in fact, in terms of communication, right, that is a value of commercial publishing. The power of it is the gatekeeping. What I mean is that, and you see this in fandom, there's so much more stuff being written than you can look at to decide if you like, right? You don't even have the time to do that. And so, in fact, what the publishing industry is kind of a sieve, and it's not necessarily a very good sieve. For a long time, it's even now, it's still very heavily slanted by the blinkered perspective that we all have. We all only have our own perspective, but publishing was dominated for so long by relatively small numbers of groups, and so that was the sieve. They were the sieve. And so, for instance, there was a long time before you would get works that really were like, well, I want to read that, because if you're not in the sieve, and your tastes are not being selected for, then you don't get what you want on the other side. But when the sieve works, right, what it does is it picks out things, and then, like when you look at this, right, I mean, I wrote the words on the pages. Somebody literally had to lay these words out in another program. I did not do that. Somebody had to, multiple people worked on this artwork. Literally my editor found references. We looked at multiple artists. We found an artist who drew the sketch. The art director, was weighing in on it. The actual, the cover had to be designed by somebody. They asked different authors to read it and provide blurbs. There's work in providing blurbs. All the machinery of this, which then essentially, and what this is meant to do, right? What this is doing to the words on the inside is it's like, hey, this is good. You're going to like this. Look at me, right? And that makes people, all that work is to get people who come, who like choose the books that go on the shelves of bookstores to pick this book. And then ultimately to get people who go into bookstores looking for something fun to read to pick that book. And that is an enormous labor, right? There's so much work involved in it. And that is what gets a book into the hands of many, many thousands of people, right? It changes the magnitude. It's like 2 orders of magnitude over what you can reach. And the thing is that, I wish in some ways the model that we are in is the model that we were given, right? Where we're generally kind of, because of that work, right? That's what copyright is about, that they want copyright. The good thing of copyright is that I'm not taking my words and hiding them behind a paywall and making you sign a document in blood and pay large amounts of money so that you get the copy, right? I'm publishing it in public. Anybody can walk into a bookstore and get it. And that's what copyright is intended to encourage, by making sure that nobody else can literally, take the text of my book and copy it and put it in a thing and say, this is mine and I get the money from it. And the problem is that because of the way that that's been extended to derivative works, to the kind of works that are, well, and obviously because I think some authors are really anxious about protecting their copyright and their work for financial reasons, that got expanded. But so, sorry, all of this was just to basically say that we've kind of censor ourselves because there was that atmosphere in fandom. There was that sense in fandom that you had to, that it was not, that it was, there was something wrong with it. And that was a thing that you kind of had to break away from. But because artistically, there doesn't have to be anything different in terms of what the words you write. It all feels to me like there's the practical constraints. Sorry. So that was my extremely, extremely long and winding answer.
For anyone watching us, I just want to say that we've been given more time in this room. That's why we are continuing to talk.
Sorry, I feel like I'm like sort of, I don't know. It's that sort of like let's push. Let's it's like let's make this bigger. Let's
take up space.
Yeah.
I don't think you need that reassurance, but you have it anyway.
Ella, what was the question?
Sorry.
The question was,
I genuinely don't remember. I enjoyed Naomi's answer so much. I just like went with it, and now I don't remember where we started.
Yes, that's kind of what I did, right? Yeah.
I absolutely agree. The question was for professional writers continuing to write fanfic alongside their original stories. This is the case of everyone here. So, how do you feel about that? What do you do about that?
Yeah.
Why do you do it?
Yeah. So sorry, that's fan fiction's great. That's why. I managed to answer.
I just want to say that I definitely, in writing stuff that I like submit to editors, I do not have the experience of opening an AO3 window at 1 a.m., typing a story, getting to 3 a.m., hitting post, and then getting positive feedback on it. Like that does not happen in like pro spaces. So in terms of, reasons to write fanfic, actually, whatever, I know that Naomi is a big fan of Zencho, just like I am. And Zencho had a post that was really formative for me, where I think when her first book was being published, and she wrote a series of posts called like My Publishing Journey. And in one of them, she talked about how part of like, if you want to write professionally or whatever, part of your job or part of your role is to maintain your relationship with your writing and to treat it as a relationship that's separate from your commercial career. And I've always thought about how, writing fanfic is a way to do that for me. Like writing fanfic is just keeping the flame of loving to write alive. Like that helps more than anything. When I first started writing like pro stuff and stuff to submit places, I basically stopped doing any other kind of writing because I just couldn't justify the time. I was like, I have a limited amount of time. I have to spend it on like pro stuff and on original stuff and not anything else. And 2 years went by, and like I think I wrote like maybe for Yuletide and that's it. And then 2 years went by and I realized, oh no, I need to do some other kind of writing. I can't spend all of my energy on writing that is so constrained and so that has so many pressures in it. And fanfic has been really great.
Yeah, no, when I'm not writing fic, I miss it. Yeah.
Gives me thought about motherhood.
Oh my God, that's just so, I love what you said, Marina, because I think the low pressure of fanfic is something we can all relate to, I think. When I work on original fiction, is I talked about the empty page anxiety, but it's so much more than that. And becoming a professional writer and continue to write fan fiction is just, it's so liberating. It's like I'm home. And I think what I enjoy most is like how it continues making me a better writer. It's like I write better romance, I write better adventure, I write better characters, I understand characters better. So yeah, I really agree with what you said.
Actually, I will say one of the things when I first started writing Temeraire, people would ask me like, your action scenes are great. Let me tell you, my action scenes are great because nothing is harder than writing a /sex scene where both your characters have the same pronouns, and you have to keep people conscious of which body part is where and who is who, and infuse all of that with emotion at the same time. And when you're doing that, afterwards, if you literally take that and apply it to sort of trying to describe where people are physically in space in an action scene, you got it. You kind of, it's actually the same thing. And so in fact, I've confused people by basically saying like I learned to write action by writing /
But it's true. It is true.
Yeah.
Like there was
by writing action. Yes.
Yeah. I want to say a thing, if I may, that there is something about claiming your own writing and claiming your own space in fandom specifically. We were talking, Naomi was talking earlier about women in fandom. This is also true for trans people in fandom, especially when you're older, when you're affected by misogyny, to a different degree, also affected by transphobia. There is value to being like, no, I'm taking this space. This space is mine now. There is value to saying, I will write about my own wants. I will write about things I want to see. I will not try to, I might make it more of a conversation with people around me, but I'm choosing who to talk to. I will not be like, oh, I will accept what the sieve of media gives to me. I will take it. And specifically, the thing about motherhood is when you have children, you have to be like, I will claim myself. I will say, this is my time, this is my body, this is my space. Now, obviously, you have to do it very limited amounts, but it's very important to have that. And I guess that's true also for pro writing in the same way.
Yeah, no, I absolutely, yes. And I think that it's also, I talked about, obviously I specifically mentioned women in fandom, but it's also queer people in fandom and trans people in fandom. It's fandom because it's all about, that impulse that I talked about of like the person giving me the media, the sieve, right, is not me. I'm not in there. And so what's coming out and what the person giving me the canon is interested in is not what I am interested in, is not what I need. And that power of saying, actually, I'm allowed to have what I want. I'm allowed to take what I need. And if you're not giving it to me, okay, I'm going to take the pieces that you've given me that are useful, right? The shared, because actually, sorry, that's another thing, right? When any piece of media, any piece of media is only successful insofar as people consume it, right? If, a Marvel movie is a huge success because so many people go, why do they go? They don't go just, for like to kill 2 hours, 3 hours. They go because the story has become alive in their mind, right? Because the story, and I often say this, right? Any book is 50-50 a collaboration between the author and the reader, right? Your experience of, and that's why you can see like your favorite book in the world. You go on Amazon, it's got 1-star reviews. And that's not because the book that they read was different than you. It's just that they were different. And that means that 1-star review is valid because it's for them. It's true for them and for who they are. And so, when you think about the vastly divergent experiences that anybody can have of a creative, of a piece of art, of a creative text, then, so you're borrowing space. That means it's because the thing is only alive because you've borrowed space inside my brain. And to then say, well, now you're not allowed to have more thoughts. You have to stop thinking at this point. That's what trying to restrict fan fiction is kind of like to me. And because that's being able to say my own thoughts, I'm allowed to have my thoughts. And why shouldn't I write them down and share them for other people who, like me, were not served by your original vision? And that's a good thing. That's one of the amazing things.
I think that's an incredible point. That's a very powerful statement from all of you. And I think this desire to want to tell the stories that I want to see in the world and, reclaim that power from the sieve is a big part of why people get into writing in the first place. So I'd like to ask our final question, which is actually 2 questions rolled into one. And that is, would you recommend writing fanfic to aspiring writers? And if so, why? And then to top it off, if you can include in your answer a recommendation of a fic that you recently enjoyed. Let's start off the final round. Dana A, if you could start.
So do I recommend aspiring writers to write fanfic? I think writing fanfic is great. So I would say if you want to write it and if it's something that you enjoy, I can't, say, hey, listen, everyone should start by writing fanfic. You need to have like,
you need to want to write it. Yeah, you need to want to. Right.
You need to want to. You need to have like characters that you're passionate about. You can obviously just write it as as an exercise. But I think, I try it out. If it's something that works for you, then amazing. It's possible that you're already writing fanfic without even calling it fanfic because you're writing about, you're writing inspired by Greek mythology, or you're writing inspired by Shakespeare, and you're not calling it fanfic, even though if we posted it online, maybe we would call it fanfic. So, it's all very flexible. And to talk about a recommendation, this week I have read, yes, I have read Ever Given Suez Canal fic. So yes, that has happened. I'm not going to recommend a specific one. I did read this fic. I just got back into reading Sam Bucky because of obvious reasons. So just a few old authors have started writing Sam Bucky fic, which makes me happy. So just generically, Sam Bucky fic is what I'm going to say.
Okay, no one's talking, so I'm going to talk. That's what happens. Obviously, I would recommend fanfic. I think we all would, but maybe if, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what I can say aside from yes. Unlike Dana A, I will say that I actually like strongly recommend fanfic if it works for you at all. Obviously, if you try it and it's not fun, you shouldn't do it. But I think a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise be writing are writing because of fanfic. So I think it's just a really great place to start. I think it's, if you want to ever like write, pro original or whatever, I think it's a great school. If you never want to do that, then fanfic is just a really, really amazing hobby. And it's so, I just think it makes your life better. I mean, obviously if you don't like it and it doesn't, it doesn't work for you, then it doesn't work for you. But I think giving it a shot is giving yourself an avenue into a really amazing world, both in terms of writing and in terms of community. So I don't know anyone whose life wouldn't be improved by reading and writing fanfic. So I hugely recommend that always, especially since people have, as I've kind of become more visible as a pro writer, people ask me, like, how do I get started, or, where do I go, or whatever. Fanfic is a really, 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 really great place to start. And in terms of fanfic, I've also returned to some old pastures lately for the same reasons that Dana A has, because of a certain Marvel TV show. But I have gone to a true classic, which is a fanfic called There Is No Shortage of Blood, which is 250,000 words long. I'm pretty sure it's longer than like War and Peace. It's just really amazing. I've been kind of reading it and skimming it and whatever for like a week. And I don't remember, is it by Dira? I think it's by Dira.
Yeah. It was the one about like Bucky's PTSD and therapy.
Yeah. I mean, just saying it's the one about Bucky's PTSD does not narrow it down, but it is, it's really, really good, and has some similarities to the Marvel show. Definitely, if you've seen the Marvel show, you should read it for a much better take on Bucky's PTSD. So that would be my rec.
So I would say in terms of fan fiction, I feel like if you try to write fanfic in order to sort of train yourself to write profic, that is not going to be an effective, I don't recommend that, in the sense that you're not going to write good fanfic. That the point of fanfic, to me, the value of it is, there is a practical value, which is that in fandom, the people reading your work are there to read, as opposed to because you're in like a writing group where you're trading quid pro quo. And that's an enormously valuable thing, because it means that anybody who reads your story is only reading because they want to read it, which is what you need as a pro writer. But I would say that the big point for me is that fandom is this place of joy and pleasure in writing, and that it teaches you to chase that. And it teaches you to connect, as you were actually saying, Marina, with the joy of writing and with your own art. And so in a way, it doesn't work if you don't already if you want to do it, you should do it. And what I would say rather is, if somebody's like, well, why are you writing fanfic? You should say, it's great, it's good for me. It's making me a better writer. And that's where I would say, I would recommend it in that sense. And then I would say, recommending one, I actually, I literally have like all these bookmarks for The Untamed that I can't actually recommend, because I've been waiting to read them until I've actually had time to watch the show. And I have no time. I mean, when I watch TV these days, it's because one of my friends is like, hey, I'm about to watch an episode. Sit down and watch it with me. And very often, I'm like fast forwarding through about half of every episode I watch of TV, because because this year. So I've actually been doing a lot of rereading of comfort stuff. And just the other day, I actually reread a story by Brancher in Lord of the Rings called They Say of the Elves, which I adore. And it was one of those things where I'm in fact a harder sell for fan fiction based on books than on media, because you need to get the author's textual voice right, and not just the character voices right. And I'm much more open to interpretation. And that's one of the few stories that captured Tolkien's voice for me closely enough that I was like, yes, that's Gimli and Legolas. And so that I love that story. I go back to it quite often. Also, it's nice and short, so that fits my attention span these days. But that's my rec.
Autumn, how about you?
So I agree with everything that was said, basically, but I think like continuing to write fanfics and writing fanfics to like, I mean, if you enjoy writing fanfics, if it's something that you love, and whether you're in the beginning of your way as a writer or somewhere in the end or somewhere in the middle, there's something like, I mean, it always surprises you. I always think we have like a very small community here in Israel, not just the fandom community, but like the sci-fi community, the reader community. And I always think, okay, I've reached my audience. It's like I can't even find one more person that likes sci-fi and will read my original fiction. And then I joined some kind of a fanfic, like the Novi God in Sfarim and books ? And someone discovers my original work through my fanfics, and I think it's wonderful. So that's like a twist I would put on that, on whether I would like recommend writing fanfics to someone who aspires to be a professional writer, because apart from everything we said, it's like, it's publicity. We can't diss publicity. It's important. And so I'm gonna recommend a fanfic that I read in Sfarim books ? In the last Novi God project, because I just reread them all. It's called Susan of Narnia, and it takes the concept of, I mean, fanfics were written on this subject, but I think this one does a lot of justice to the character of Susan and makes her like the center of the story. So it doesn't come all the way to the end of the last battle, but I'm pretty sure the way it started, it like hints that it will not get there. It will not get to the part where Susan is left alone because she likes boys and doesn't like Narnia anymore. And I love that.
Dana, what about you?
My time has come. Actually, not because I don't want to repeat what everyone said about writing fanfic. Short answer, yes. A thing I want to point out is the culture of betaing in fandom, and the difference between that and having people read your fic in other circles. My first writing experience was in a group of writing Hebrew science fiction, and the commenting culture there was more aligned with being funny to the people reading than with being, kind to the people writing, which is what it is. But at the time, I was 18. I literally said, you know what? I can't take the heat. I'm getting out of the kitchen. And I didn't write for a few years. And then when I finally got back into fanfic, I found beta readers. I found people older than me and kinder and experienced who would be like, yes, here, you need to fix this, 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 and this. No, the story is still good. It has value, promise. And that was huge for me. That was amazing. And you have a lot of stuff in the pro writing community. I think I've run into a lot of stuff where you need to have a thick skin. I don't think you do. I don't think, like, maybe you do to deal with the community as it is, but I don't think if you don't have a thick skin, I don't think that's a flaw in the person. I think that's a flaw in the writing community. There's no reason not to be kind about it, is my opinion, of course. With regard to Rex, the first thing that comes to mind, so I'm wrecking it, is it's about hockey players. I don't know why, well, I know why I started reading hockey players, and two of the people to blame are sitting right here. Anyway, fastening one heart to every falling thing. Is that the title? I think I got it right. It's about an alternate universe where people have soul bonds, and you have a main character who is so psychically sensitive he cannot stand any kind of anything, and a character who just doesn't have that psychic thing at all. So they end up in a relationship where they don't have a soul bond, and in a universe where everybody has soul bonds. And it's an amazing story. I love it. It's beautiful. It encapsulates a lot of what I love about fanfic, which is you get to play with relationship building. You get to look into how to construct a relationship. If you'll pardon the programming metaphors, you get to play with the config files for the relationships instead of just doing the factory settings. And that's a really cool thing to do.
Who's the author?
Mm-hmm.
You remember
The Fourth Vine.
That's what I thought. Of course.
Classic. Top shelf. I'll wrap up with a rec in the Hannibal fandom with a fic called Two Solitudes, and actually anything by the author is amazing and warmly recommended. I think we have quite a lovely collection of stories here, and it's been an incredible discussion. So thank you to all our wonderful panelists, and especially to our amazing guest of honor, Naomi. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us this evening. I hope you enjoyed.
I need to interrupt to thank all of you for welcoming me to the con, and I cannot wait to come in person and actually see you all, and have this conversation again in a room where we're all like, you know, drinking coffee at the same time and like just hanging around and chatting, and you know, it's been really such a pleasure these last few days just to hang out with you all and talk. And thank you very much for having me.
Don't go. We can continue. We can take over this channel. Okay.
Sadly, you know, I talked about how I have no time. I'm literally like, I'm booked for the rest of the day.
Well, so we're gonna hold you to that. You know, I think everyone here would love that, to sit all in room and fangirl together in a physical space. That would be the dream.
It would be great.
The room where it happens.
So thank you so much to everyone, and everyone enjoy the rest of the con.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.